This episode is brought to you by Hack Motion. Hack Motion is a cutting-edge wrist sensor for teaching wrist motion for compressed tour-like shots. I spent some time with these guys down at the show, and I really enjoyed how easy it was to use, and the calibration time was super simple, and especially the biofeedback option that will definitely make for a more effective golf lesson for your students. You can use it with your iPhone, your iPad, and it gives your students the feel to go along with the reel as you teach the proper wrist motion for better club face control, which, as you know, is huge in the teaching game. Used by some of the top coaches in our industry, Hack Motion is a must for serious golf teachers, coaches, or players. Also, when ordering upon checkout, use the promo code GURU, G-U-R-U, to receive free shipping, which is a $30 value. For more information and to order, visit their website at hackmotion.com. HACKMOTION.com today.
It's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
You know how to cut to the core of me, Baxter. You're so wise. But like a miniature Buddha covered in hair.
I want to become a guru so girls will like me. Then I will like myself.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Golf Guru Show. I am your host, Jason Sutton, and I am the Guru. On today's show, I'm very excited to have my good friend back on the show, Mr. John Graham. And John is a full-time putting coach, putting specialist that works with players on the PGA and LPGA Tour, such as Charles Howell III, Graham McDowell, Masters champion Danny Willett, and Daniel Berger, and Joel Damon, and also a few on the LPGA Tour as well. This is an impromptu interview that we had this week as he was staying at Casa Guru during the Wells Fargo as he's working with his players. So I thought this was a great opportunity for us to sit down and talk about really what I've learned from John, because he's taught me so much about putting, and really provide you, the listener, with some valuable nuggets that I think will help you with your putting coaching, and also just some cool discussions on what he's doing with his players. I hope this discussion will open your eyes in a way that will enhance the true qualities of a great putting coach, and really a golf coach in general in all facets of the game, which would include being a critical thinker, a problem solver, and understanding patterns and being able to read the player in front of you. So we talk a lot about the EQ as it relates to teaching putting and then really teaching in general. So there's a lot of nuggets to be gleaned from this discussion that you can apply to all areas of your game. You can find John on Instagram or Twitter at John Graham Golf, and you can reach me at Golf Guru TV on the same platforms, and also on the Book of Faces. So without further ado, I give you the brilliant Mr. John Graham. Enjoy. All right, John Graham, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for taking the time. We're spending the week together. You're here at the Wells.
Indeed.
Coaching your stable of players, which is awesome. And we spent...
team.
What's that?
My bobsled team.
Yeah, there it is. So it's exciting to have you back as an individual. You were my first podcast guest.
Yes.
You and James.
Yes.
100 years ago, it seems like, with horrible audio.
No, it was.
And I really feel bad about that, but I didn't know what I was doing.
There you go.
Right? So now we've got great audio to get the dulcet tones of JG going across the airwaves. So I want to start with saying that, and we've talked about this many times, that you've been such an influence in my teaching, especially, obviously my putting coaching, as I've copied everything that you've done and really learned so much from you. And I think you may be one of the most mention guests on our podcast because every time putting comes up, I got to give you credit. So yeah, absolutely. So take me back to the beginning. We're not going to talk about your career so much. Everybody knows the story, but I'm more interested in how you started to develop your philosophy, right? So when you started, think about your first putting lesson, because you were a full swing guy, just like all of us, for several years, and we were all going through the rabbit holes of D-plane and TrackMan and trying to learn, and then you transitioned into teaching putting for a living, and you started down that road. So talk a little bit about how you got started in that, and then sort of how you developed the philosophy.
Sure. So, it would have to start with getting involved with Aimpoint very, very early on, 2008, 2009, something like that, 10 years ago when it was just getting going. And I had seen a video on David Orr's website called maybe Green Reading 101 or something. And I'm like, gosh, I've never seen a video on teaching somebody how to read a green. This has got to be really interesting. And at that time, I was a college coach for a 2-year school in Rochester. I'm like, anything I can learn to help these guys play better, I'm going to do it. So I watched this video, which was basically a video of Mark Sweeney giving the original Aimpoint class to David's PGM class. And I watched it, and I'm like, wow, that was really interesting. I know for sure I can prove that this doesn't work. I got on a piece of paper, and I just started writing things down. What about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? And I contacted Mark Sweeney, and he came up and did a class up in Rochester. And I brought up my list of questions, and he had great answers for all of it. So I'm like, okay, I want to get involved in this program, this thing. So, me and Rob Noel argue all the time about who was certified first, whether it was me or whether it was him. For sure it was me, but
Yeah.
but we still argue.
It was close.
It was close. And then from that, it didn't take too long to figure out that, okay, even if I can teach a good level player to read a green well, if they can't do the other pieces to the puzzle, it doesn't really help that much. It certainly makes their misses closer, but at some point a miss has to turn into a make to get better. And then I'm like, okay, I need to learn some of these other things. And like I had done mostly with full swing stuff, I went right online and just tried to find things, try to figure out, okay, what at least is the way my mind thought at that time was, okay, well, if I can teach them to read it well, and all I need to then do is teach them to aim it well, and then start it right there, and then with good speed, and everything will be okay.
Yeah, seems simple, right?
It seems simple, right? It's
Yeah.
great in theory, great engineering models, beautiful on paper, everything sounds great. And so I started down that road. It's like, okay, well, how can I now teach perfect aim? How can I teach start line? How can I teach speed control? And it only got me so far working under that paradigm. And then I'm like, okay, well, why does this guy still do okay when he doesn't do any of those things? And why does this person do okay when they don't do any of those things either? And then it turned into a mental exercise of, okay, what's really important? Let's kind of boil this down. What things are kind of, it's a stack and tilt guys would say, what are true fundamentals and what are preferences?
Right.
So I kind of started with that idea of, okay, well, we know that the ball needs to start in the right place. We know it needs to go at some speed where the hole will actually capture it. And then hopefully the read kind of ties in with all that. So I started with a much more broader model after I figured out that the specific one didn't work at all. And then just kind of went down that rabbit hole.
So what did that look like? Like, what did the early model look like?
Well, like I said, the early model was, well, I must teach them to aim straight and hit it straight and hit at perfect speed.
Yeah.
Because I know I can teach them to read a green. That's no problem.
Sure.
Now I just make them do the other things, and the ball will just automatically go in. And that is just not viable as a universal way of doing it.
So when did that break down, like for you in your mind? Because I love the way you think, and I know that's sort of brought you to where you are now. And we'll dig into that, hopefully, if you can share some of that. But I know there's probably one moment where you're like, okay, this is not working. I need to pivot and like figure some other stuff out.
Yeah, it didn't take very long at all because, once a person has played enough golf and gotten to a pretty good level, I noticed it right with the college players that I had on my own team, that I I couldn't get them to do what I needed them to do unless I had started from the very beginning. If I had a brand new beginner and I'm like, okay, well, we're going to teach you how to aim it straight and hit it straight and read everything fine, that seemed much more likely that it could happen. Once somebody had all of this history and all of this local knowledge, if you will, of kind of how to make this thing happen, even though they didn't know what they were doing, but they could still do it okay, that's when I found out it's like, okay, well, even though that answer is correct in terms of like the read, because it always started with me with the read, because that's the area that I grew up or started in was with the endpoint stuff. And okay, and even if I tell them, okay, that's the right answer, if they have other biases that are already built in that I didn't really consider at the time, well, we'll just make those biases go away. We'll just erase them. That just didn't happen, and they didn't get better. And for me, and John Hardesty and I talk about this all the time about, you got to make the boat go faster.
Yeah, will the boat? Yeah, what makes?
Faster,
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
How do I get the ball in the hole sooner, fewer strokes, whatnot? And as long as you're looking at it through that lens, a lot of things now can just kind of fall away. And it's like, okay, what do I actually need to get this person to do to make that read work with this speed and this stroke and this aim bias or whatever the case may be, so that the probability would kind of move in their direction, so that makes happen more often. So that's I mean, it happened, like I said, right with the college kids on my own team. That's like my lovely engineering model on paper is just not going to be viable across the spectrum.
So how do you develop that? I mean, it obviously, and we talked about this the other night at dinner, is how much you've changed, and you can tell me if I'm full of crap here, but your EQ has definitely gone way up, I think, in the fact that you're able to work with different personalities. I mean, we've talked about, and we'll dig into like the stable of players that you have, and all of them are completely different. Yeah. And so you've got to treat them individually different in how you spoon feed the information, how you react to the different answers and questions that you get from each player.
Right.
I mean, how does that develop? Or is it just sort of nature of going, all right, I've got to do something different or I'm going to fail?
Well, I think like any teacher, when they're kind of getting into a subject matter, they're first going to start with what they know in terms of, this is how I need information presented to me to learn.
Sure.
So I'm going to present this type of information in this way because everybody else has to learn the way I do, because that's obviously the best way to learn.
Yeah, we always think that we're the best.
Yeah.
And everybody gets what we're saying.
Exactly.
And I think we've talked about that too, is like, we don't know if the message is really coming through until we start to see change or we start to see adaptability in our players, right?
Exactly correct. So obviously certain people that have a similar kind of thought process that I had, they could go down this road, no problem. They got better, fine. And then the other people are like, okay, I don't even know what you're talking about. Give me something different. It's like, okay, I need to really change now the way that I put groups of words together, when I say it, how I say it, what pictures I use, what phrases, what body language they're presenting to me, how, am I actually getting this information across?
Sure.
Okay, if I am, is it the information that I wanted to get across? And then is this information that they can actually use and be valuable? So there's like this whole combination of, okay, I think this is right. I think I said this. I hope they heard this. Okay, this is what it looks like they heard. Here's what they're doing. How do all those fit together in terms of, how's the ball going faster? And then, being malleable enough to kind of work through that and being okay with that.
Is there a feedback loop that you've seen with your players that you can sort of grab onto and say, yeah, he's got it? Is it like, we call that the aha moment a lot of times, right? Or is it just I know you're very results driven, obviously, with being a putting coach. Yeah. How do you evaluate that on a day-to-day basis?
I guess if I'm being honest, I evaluate it most through a person's facial expressions and their eyes. You can just look at somebody and they're like, okay, I don't get this. And it's just whatever that image of their face is like, okay, I blew this.
That look.
They have no idea what I'm talking about, or they're done listening and we need to do something else. So it's certainly much more on that side of things. It's like, you can, again, you can see and kind of tell when somebody starts to get it. It's like, oh, okay, I got this. Okay, I'm going to go down this road. And then the questions that they ask, or the little comments that they make, or the little flicker in their eye, like those are the things that I'm really looking for, is how learning is presented in a nonverbal way, either by body motion or body language, that kind of stuff. So I use that as my guide almost all the time.
Do you think, because your clientele obviously is different than most,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm teaching club players and the occasional tour player, and yours is strictly tour players.
Almost exclusive.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that's different just because, I mean, we can have that conversation, obviously talent level is way, way different,
Yeah.
but as far as the learning process and adaptability and then consuming the information, do you think it's different?
I don't really think it's that different. It's once that they've consumed it, what they can do with it, and how fast they can recognize.
How fast they can change.
How fast they can change.
And put it into like super high pressure situations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. How quickly can they realize, okay, this is what I was doing, here's what I want to do. Okay, these are different. They feel this way. Charles Howell and I talk quite a bit often about like pattern recognition and how good elite level players are at that they can either get a particular feel and just kind of ride it until all of a sudden the feel is gone. It's like, this feel no longer works for me. I need something else. And then we have to have something that means almost the exact same thing with a different feel or different set of words or different whatever, that allows the person's brain to stay active enough and engaged enough to say, okay, I still feel like I'm either getting better or maintaining what I want, but I no longer am dull or worn out or bored, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I find that working with guys, just even with full swing, even though you're moving in the right direction, if you continue to give them the same information over time, they at some point think that it's wrong.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
So, and then they say, well, I need somebody else. That's when coaches get fired.
Absolutely.
Or they move on, or they think something they need to change.
Yeah.
I mean, so you've got to continually freshen your information or the way you present it, right? I mean,
correct. One of the things I try to do as best that I can is try to prepare for when the next field change is coming.
that's a great way to put it.
So
Yeah.
like I can kind of see, okay, this feels going well. Okay, here's a little peak. Now it's starting to kind of drop. Okay, this person's getting pissed. They're still doing pretty much okay, but if they're like, I'm tired of hearing this, I want to hear something else. It doesn't necessarily mean they want to do something different. They just want to hear something new or something that's like, oh, okay, that's a different way of thinking about it. Let me put this into my, melting pot and kind of fiddle it in there. So I'm constantly trying to look to see, okay, here's what I've said, here's what I'm seeing, here's what they're doing. Okay, this is going well. If it doesn't go well, it could be 1, 2, 3, one of those 3 reasons. Okay, if it does continue to go well, how can I modify it to keep it going well? And okay, if I don't really need to keep it going well, but I want to make it just a little bit better, what 1 or 2, 3 things should I get ready for to add to the next little piece of it? So most of the time I'm thinking of, is this working? And then if it's not, okay, what comes next? Or if it is, what comes next?
Right.
Like there's no, okay, I've got the magic pill. Okay, they're going to be fine. I can just walk away. I have to constantly be ready for, this no longer helps me. I need something new. Whether they really need that or not doesn't really matter. They're just gonna say it, and they're gonna want it.
Well, and it's as coaches, our perception of okay,
Yeah,
and the player's perception of okay can be different.
correct.
Right? They think that they're stagnant, and we know they're moving forward.
Right.
So that I'm sure you have to have continuous conversations with, all right, remember where we used to be.
Right.
This is where we are now, and this is where I promise you're going to be, to keep them sort of engaged, right?
Correct. Right. And obviously certain personalities require certain levels of engagement and certain specificity of direction in terms of, if I do this, okay, then I'd probably this, and then this. They can see the connecting the dots starting to happen. Mm-hmm. Other people don't really care about that. They're just, give me something for today, or give me something easy, something simple that I can play with, or just train with, and then I can just forget it and just play. So that again kind of gets down to the EQ part. Is like, who is this person in front of me? What kind of roadmap is going to work best for them, and then how can I best deliver that for them?
Yeah, and I think we discussed this last night at dinner when I from your perspective, in your own little brain, you feel like you're doing the same thing that you used to do.
Yeah.
But I've seen you evolve as a coach, and I'm watching you with the players the last 2 days, and it's the little things in between the cracks, which is how you handle the structure of the lesson, the time that you give the information, how you give the information, reading their body language, and then deflecting the odd questions,
Right.
as we just saw today with our buddy Charles Howell.
Yeah.
The whole way around, we're trying to discuss like what I would consider minute things, but to them, it's a player, it's huge.
It's huge,
right? I mean,
we don't get to decide what's important for them.
Absolutely,
Right.
they're the boss, right? So and that was what I learned today, was how important it is, just the minute detail, because I think he's one of the most prepared players on tour.
Very high golf IQ.
Absolutely, and I love spending time with Charles, and hopefully he'll be on the podcast soon, which will be really cool, because he's almost like a teacher in a player's body,
Right, exactly.
right? Because
Yeah,
he's
that's a great
so
way to
well
put it.
informed.
Yeah.
And he's so educated, which is so cool, and that's why I love him so much. Talk about, if you're comfortable talking with your different players, because you've got Daniel Berger, you've got Joel Damon, which I would say are sort of in a similar camp, right? Like things relatively simple.
Yep.
And then you've got Charles, and now you got Danny Willett, that are a bit more the why guys,
Yeah,
right?
exactly, for sure.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about what you're working on with those guys, and then how you handle those different situations.
Right. So, so Daniel Berger, I've actually worked with for a few years, but usually maybe only 2 or 3 times a year. And when I first got invited to, I would say, interview for that position, his coach at the time kind of gave me some background as to, how he's worked with Daniel since he was 13, 14 years old. And it's like, okay, this is the umbrella that I've worked under for the last 10 years. I need you to kind of know how he wants to hear things, how he likes to do things, so that it gives you the best chance to be able to help him based on how he's going to want to hear and know things. So Daniel is no question someone who wants very simple and easy answers, direct things that he can do that show immediate results. It doesn't need to know why he's doing that. It doesn't need to know, how it changes anything. It's just, okay, you put your pinky on your toe and everything will be fine. Okay, I'll do
Very
that.
feels sort of athletic type, I would like
100%.
the way I would describe him.
100%.
Yeah.
And he's one of the greatest things about Daniel is that he doesn't need like constant reminder. Like if he hits 3 or 4 bad putts, it's like, okay, well I hit 3 or 4 bad putts.
Yeah.
Then I'll hit a good putt.
Short memory, which is great for golf.
100%.
Yeah.
Right. And
Love those kind of students.
exactly. So it's like after a little while, it almost turns into like more of a monitoring station than it is a continual education. Like he doesn't necessarily need to continue to get better in terms of I need something new to get better.
Sure.
He just wants to see, okay, does this actually produce a better outcome if I continue to do it? And if it does, okay, then I'm going to continue to do it. And Joel is kind of in that same category. Joel does a little bit more on the social media side of things, so he's more into the why, but he performs better when he doesn't need it, the why.
Sure.
So if I can give him just the how, okay, just do this, he can kind of convert it into his own field. Doesn't necessarily know, the science behind why he's doing that. Even though, like, I think his general curiosity enjoys that, I don't think he necessarily performs better when he has that. And his caddy, Gino, has helped me quite a bit with working with him in terms of, because they've known each other for a really, really long time. He kind of knows how his player plays his best. Yeah. He knows there's things that he can get better at, but generally if somebody asks me a question, I'm going to answer it. And if they ask me a very detailed question, they could get a very detailed answer. And I have to sometimes be careful of how...
You got to watch what you say, right?
I got to watch what I say.
Yeah.
And because I'll go down the rabbit hole as fast as anybody
sure.
can. Sure,
because you just do you.
Right.
And you don't remember
right.
who's in front of you.
Right. I'm going to default to what I would want to hear. And if I don't know the person well enough, they're going to get some stuff that maybe they weren't expecting. And I've got to try and prepare for that as best as I can.
Sure.
And this is why, in my opinion, at least as far as my role, especially the caddy, has a huge impact and influence on how I present what I'm going to present.
We saw that today, right?
No doubt.
It was a constant banter with
Right.
with Charles's caddy, and he had very valuable input because
100%.
he's with him more than anybody.
Way more than I'm ever going to be with. He's
Right.
going to see things in the environment at the moment when the most pressure is applied, and that's invaluable. So for me, like the caddy's input is critical. So Joel and Daniel are kind of in that camp of keep it simple, make it right, make them better, make the boat go faster. Don't need to know why. And then you've got Charles and Danny on the other side, who I would say are closer to the way that I think in terms of I actually can be more relaxed when I know more, not when I know less. So for me, questions that are unanswered are like little splinters that I have to get an answer to this question, otherwise I can't stop thinking about it. And I think kind of Charles and Danny are more in that camp. So the answers to the questions now become that relaxes them, not the not thinking part. It allows the athleticism to come in. It's like, okay, now I no longer have to worry about that. Now I can just do this. So
ups their commitment,
exactly,
and their confidence, I guess,
Right.
of they're doing the right things.
Well, that's the biggest one, right?
Yeah.
Because if a why person asks the why question and the coach gives them a how answer, that's not going to cut it. It's just not going to cut it. And if it's but if you give them a good why answer, you've sold it. Like you are now the guy that, okay, I can actually trust this person.
Sure.
Here's somebody who's a straight talker. Here's someone who's just going to give me information and then I just get to decide what I want to do with it. This person's not going to kind of, fluff it up or politicize it, or whatever the word might be. This is just the answer. You do with it whatever you want with. Which I would put Graham McDowell kind of also in that category.
I was going to say I forgot about Graham.
Right.
So you've got 2 wins on tour in the last year. Basically, Graham just won.
Yeah, 6
And then
months
Charles.
in November. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, especially for both those guys, because obviously Charles hadn't won in 10 years, and Graham was kind of coming off a little slump, and now with the win, he can kind of play a little bit more loose. He was kind of, he's obviously got a lot of, pressure on himself to get into Portrush. That's obviously the goal.
Yeah.
It's the
Get
course
back to his hometown.
It's the course he played as a kid. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a big deal for him, and obviously now getting the win takes a lot of that pressure off. It doesn't get him in the Open still. He's still got to get in.
He's
another
still
way.
got a little bit of work to do.
But now he doesn't have as much pressure on everything. He can play a little bit more free and a little bit more loose, like he would prefer. But again, he's another person who is another golf high IQ guy.
Yeah.
But again, the information is more of a calming influence. It's not, I need the information to be able to do things. I need the information so I can stop thinking about it, so I can then now
Quiet
do my
the
athleticism.
mind.
Exactly right.
Yeah. That's interesting.
So it's again, a lot of the beginning of it is trying to figure out, kind of how the person works. That being said, with all of them, the first day has always been exactly the same. I run this assessment that I've talked about for however many years.
Yeah, why don't you go through that a little bit? I mean, for the guys that didn't listen to the very first podcast, just take us through how you test players, because I mean, that was the biggest thing that I learned from you. I would say 5 years ago when I started getting into teaching more putting and wanted to do better and be a more well-rounded coach, is I flipped the script on not going for mechanics first, but figuring out tendencies and then sort of what I call reverse engineering into the stroke.
Right.
I think that's huge, and that changed my whole world, and it actually helped me to be more successful as a putting coach. So take us through sort of a mock scenario of how you deal with a student.
Sure thing. So, and I would do this for any level of player that I knew I was going to see for potentially a while. So the first thing I always do is I always measure a player on SAM before I even really talk to them. I'll shake
But
their hand.
do you show it to them right away?
No.
Yeah, so that's just for the initial baseline,
It's
right?
just an initial baseline.
Right.
One of the things I've been starting to do recently, that might be news for some of the listeners, is that I've come to the belief that uncertainty is actually a part of the stroke. So when I set up the putt that's straight, I no longer set up a straight putt. I tell them, put the ball down where you think is a straight putt from 10 feet away, and we're just going to hit it. and then we're just going to see what happens. When I tell them that it's straight, I don't really get the true straight feel that a player truly has. It's like as soon as a player knows it's straight, they make their best stroke, whatever that might be.
Okay.
I don't want to see that. I want to see what stroke they make when they're really not sure.
And this is on Sam.
This is on Sam, right?
So you let them pick the spot.
I tell them, right. You
then set the Sam up of wherever that in the middle of the hole.
Exactly right.
Okay.
And then obviously
if they miss it because they actually picked a crooked putt, then they have to adjust, and you just want to see what happens.
Right. And the funny thing is sometimes they actually adjust and they don't know that they adjust. Like they choose a spot that they think is straight.
Instinct.
Right. And then they kind of aim a little left and they actually make it. And it's like, well, I wasn't really sure this was perfectly straight. But they don't really know that they're doing that.
Yeah.
But it's another way that I can gather information from them without asking for it. So I've been doing that recently, and that's been working out pretty well. So I'll do 5 putts straight, 5 putts left to right, 5 putts right to left. And again, that's just for me. I collect that, and then we move on to more conceptual things. After that, I do the Black Mamba next, where I have them draw out the putt.
With the rope.
With the rope.
Right.
I mean, listeners, if I can't emphasize it enough how simple and easy this is for you to learn who the person is in front of you. Not just the green reading piece, but like who this person actually is, whether it's coins or discs like James Hong was doing, or a rope or whatever. Let them draw what they think they see.
So tell me, like, let's dig into that, because that's huge. I think in reading, right? So tell them about, like, you're looking at where they start the rope, how detailed they are. Like, talk about that.
Yeah, I'm to be fair, I'm looking at like where they stand, where they're looking from, how they start it, how organized it is, how structured the movement of the rope, how they. It's kind of funny because if you've done it enough times and you watch some people try to make it look the way they want, some people really struggle with it. Like they got their hands out and they put the putter down and they're trying.
How are they going to actually do it? Right.
Right. And then some guys are like grab a putter and they just kind of slide it along the rope, and like that's actually a part of problem solving that I want to see how they, because making the rope look good is difficult.
Sure.
Some people can solve it really easy and they make this nice smooth little arc. It's like, it's beautiful. Other people are like, boy, I really want this to look nicer, but I can't figure out how to make it look nicer. Some people don't care what it looks like. They just kind of put down this haphazard thing. And those are really key little pieces of information of kind of how this person maybe even wants the information I'm going to present later on down the assessment. Because up until this time, I haven't given them anything. I've just measured them at all. Just that little exercise now kind of gives me an idea of what words I should use and when I should use them, and that kind of idea that I can't really get any other way without asking them, and then I get a biased answer that they're going to give me. So I need to try to get like a true picture of.
Nobody has a good self-assessment.
No.
Anyway.
Exactly.
Right? That's 100%. So critical. I mean, that's brilliant.
So how I ran into that, I have no idea. I
remember you said you saw the David Orr video when he was drawing he did the rope. That was the first thing.
That's the first time I'd seen it.
Sparked it, and then you just took it to another level.
Right. And he had like the green and yellow and red section. I think it was like this. Like the rope that I had seen him use was like a speed rope. So it had like a start phase and a roll phase and an end phase, and he had them color coded. And I thought that, that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And I just, like you said, I just kind of took that and kind of ran with it and see what I could come up with it. But it was definitely David's idea that I stole. Thanks, David.
Yeah, no kidding.
So then after we do that part, sometimes a player will be loud enough and they'll say, well, I want to test it and see if it was right.
Then you let them putt it.
Sometimes I'll let them putt it. Sometimes I won't. I don't know why I choose what I choose when I choose it, but
there's the cracks. That's it. That's the genius. That's the genius stuff, right? I mean, that's the decisions that you have to make as a coach.
Right.
And it's more instinct. I feel it the same way when I'm doing the same thing. Is like sometimes I do this, sometimes, and my people watching me teach, I'm like, I have no idea. It's just what I felt.
Right. There's something's telling me that I shouldn't let them see it or something.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, so this person can handle this.
Right.
This person's not going to be able to handle whatever this answer is.
Yep.
So then after that part, then I do this kind of coin drill where I take 2 coins about 5 feet apart. I generally put it on a slope that's fairly steep. I and one of the coins is higher than the other, so it's a slightly downhill environment where I tell the player to hit the ball from one coin and make it stop on the other. It's a task they're not usually accustomed to make the ball stop in a particular place. It's always make the ball go in the hole. So I kind of get to see how they run through that piece of it. Then I explain a whole bunch of stuff based on what their outcomes are. I've been playing around with different ways of, like, after I do that part, sometimes I'll put a fake hole in and ask the player, okay, where should this hole be if I want to stop the ball here based on what you've seen. Sometimes I don't do that. Again, it kind of depends on something that I can't describe.
But would you agree that's like when I do that drill or that test, I always explain to the student that's the number one skill in putting is stopping the ball where you want to stop it.
Exactly.
Right?
Right.
Okay, continue.
Yeah, and then green reading is putting the hole between those two places.
Right.
Right.
To capture the ball and all that sort of works
Exactly.
together.
So even just that little explanation kind of starts to change, especially like a high school player or a college player. I don't think their pictures are very clear in terms of what they're actually kind of trying to get done.
100%.
And hopefully that kind of clears some of that up for them. And then after that, there's some speed environmental tests that I'll do, whether it be a Goldilocks type thing or like this ladder leapfrog thing that I've been doing with Daniel recently.
Well, explain the Goldilocks for everybody.
So the Goldilocks is just it's a drill that I first saw James Ridyard do, and I know he got it from somebody else. But
With the wedges, right?
With the wedges, exactly. But I can't remember who he got it from. It might have been this guy in Sweden. His name is lost on me. In any event, where I would set out a coin or tee or fake hole, usually a coin, and I asked the player to purposely hit one too long, purposely hit one too short, and then purposely hit one just right. And then the length of that kind of spacing depends on how difficult the putt is. And I'll usually ask the player to kind of call it as they hit it. Oftentimes I'll stand in the way so they can't see where the ball goes, and they still have to call it.
So explain what that does to the player. I mean, what is that teaching them? The neurological awareness? I mean, what is that called? I'm sure there's a term.
Yeah, I'm sure there is.
I don't know. I mean, like I get it, but I mean, there's a rhyme or reason for that, right?
Right. I mean, the reason that I do it, at least I feel like it allows me to assess their ability to adapt.
Okay.
How well can a person do what they try, and then how well can they adjust what they're going to do next based on what they just felt, and then can they correct it at the end? So the goal.
And did they feel the right thing, right?
Exactly.
Like
right.
I think you told me about one of the guys that said he thought it was really long, it was super short.
Exactly,
I mean,
right.
Like you got to get that bridge to be a little smaller, right?
Correct. I mean, from the better putters that I've spoken with, there's a very clear picture of what the ball path should look like. So that's a green reading piece.
Okay.
Then next to that would be a very clear intent of what stroke produces that path in terms of length and speed and all that kind of stuff. Like those things are in their head, and then they get over the ball and try to run that program. The players who really struggle the most are trying to make it up over the ball. Like they don't really have a clear picture of where the ball is going to go. They don't have a clear picture of what stroke equals that picture, and they're just like, well, it's just feel. I'll just kind of make it happen, and that's not good enough. You've got to have a much more clear intent.
And that's something I learned that was
we talked
new
about last night.
Yeah,
right?
last night you were saying like the question.
Right, that I asked Nick, your son. Yeah.
Yeah, like talk about that, and I think that was huge. The big light bulb for me. So I've never thought to ask that question to a player. So dig into that a little bit.
Sure. So the question I would ask a player, especially if they've struggled with the Goldilocks type thing, or they called long and it was short, or something where there's a very clear disconnect between what they feel and what's happening. I'll simply ask them, do you know what stroke makes the ball go 10 feet? And, some of your smarter players will say, well, is it 10 feet uphill or is it 10 feet downhill?
They're going to ask for more information.
Right. I said, well, that's, let's just say it's 10 feet fairly straight. And they'll be like, well, I never really thought of it. I said, okay, well, do you know what swing you make to hit it 85 yards? Yes, absolutely. I said, well, what if it's uphill or downhill? Do you know how to adjust it? Absolutely. What if it's like downwind or into the wind? Yeah, absolutely. I know what to do, exactly what to do. Okay. What if you have a 10-footer downhill versus a 10-foot uphill? You know what those different strokes are? No, I just kind of feel it. And that answer is just not good enough. If they can be willing to kind of go down the road a little bit and and assign more value to a feeling instead of just calling it feel, their ability then to adapt becomes much greater. And there's usually two ways that players will tend to do that. They'll either be like just putterhead speed feel people, where they're just trying to get a feel for the speed of the club. And then there's the other group of people that are kind of backstroke length and rhythm people, where they're trying to make it go back a certain length at a certain rhythm. And when they do that, they get a certain distance, whatever that case may be. There's usually two camps. I haven't found yet anybody who's doing it a different way than those two. Excuse me. And not as many people, I would say so far, at least in my experience, are the length and rhythm people. Certainly Bryson would be in that category. Steve Stricker's in that category. He said it on the podcast. I think he did with Mark Immelman at his podcast, which is a great one. And then there's other guys that are a little more on this putterhead speed feel side. So
Gotcha.
Again, I don't care which way you do it. Doesn't matter to me.
Just has to be adaptive and consistent, right?
Exactly correct.
Yeah.
So this drill that we were doing with Danny that you saw today is this little leapfrog thing,
right?
Which is how well can a person just hit it a little bit further than they did before. So it's basically just 3 coins spread out. So there's one at 0, one at 6 feet, and one at 12. It's a very simple drill. I'm sure a bunch of listeners have either seen or done something like it, where the first putt you hit, somewhere past the 6-foot coin, but as close to it as you can. And then you have to progressively hit it a little bit further and further and further until you either run out of space or leave one short. So this is now the player's ability to compare a feeling to a new feeling and just make it a little bit more of an impulse and to get it to go a little bit further. Now, obviously, contact is going to play a big role. One of the things that I look for as a coach specifically is some players will have a difficult time at a particular distance. In other words, they'll have a particular stroke rhythm and time that works really well for like 6 feet, 6.5, 7, 7.5, 8, and then all of a sudden it's 10. And they can't figure out how to bridge the gap between what this stroke is that's kind of shortish and this one that's kind of midish, and they like burst it or they do something totally different to try to make up that time, and they no longer can manage a certain particular area. Those are the kind of things I'm kind of looking for.
So that leads me to a question that I have actually from one of my mini tour guys that I give that drill all the time, and I've actually given what I call the tour player drill that you showed me, which was the 5, 10, 15, 20, where you got 3 quadrants.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Which is really hard.
Very difficult.
So he got bored with the 6 and 12.
Right. Yep.
But he had a question. He's like, well, what if my miss, or what if my problem area is like 8 to 15 or 20 feet? Would you ever expand that drill to make it longer to match whatever problem distance they would have?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, how would you do that? Would maybe make it 10 to 20 or something? Or
I would take out the earlier pieces and just keep the longer ones and add pieces on the other end. So I might take out like the 6 to 12 and the 12 to 18. Let's say, okay, we're going to start at 18 to 24. How well can you do in that zone? And then we'll do...
Oh, so you just expand the zone.
It out and take the shorter pieces all out. So
Gotcha.
they don't need to spend their time doing it.
Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah. I think I would... Do you do that a lot, or do you find yourself just doing the same?
Well, the progression one is so difficult that a lot of people get frustrated with it.
Yeah.
This is one of the greatest things about coaching is you can see certain people that are going to love it when you make it harder for them. So you kind of give them this kind of easy thing to start with.
This kid's that way.
Exactly.
Yeah, I got some that are like want to quit.
Right.
They're like, why am I doing this? Because I suck at it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And when you find somebody that you can see, okay, when I make this harder, they're gonna like this even more. And then when I make it harder again, they're gonna like it even more. But if you don't have that ability to do that, you kind of get stuck in that place where like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. This is boring. I can either do it okay, or I can't do it. Give me something else. Mm-hmm. And it's not that you've necessarily hurt them or made them necessarily better. They're just bored.
Yeah.
I mean, putting is boring. I'm sorry. I can't explain it any other way. I can't make somebody hit like this low spinning chip putt. You know, all it does is just roll on the ground. You can't
side spin with the putt or something.
It's like there's no sexy little like do this special little move and I can make the ball do something different. You can't. There's nothing you can do. So all you can do is build skills, and all you can do is add probability to your side. But along with that, it comes boredom.
Sure.
And you've got to figure out a way to make it
exciting and make
less
it more
boring as you
challenging.
can. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So continue. So you've done the touch drill. You get the leapfrog drill.
Yep.
So all you're doing is basically observing at this point. And
Correct.
I always explain to my guys, I'm like, you're just trying to break them down.
Yes.
To show them how much they suck.
Yes. Yes.
So that they're going to listen to you and want to get better.
Correct. I'm trying to show them in a way where they can say, I need work in this area.
Sure.
Or I don't have to tell them. Because if it comes from them, it means a whole lot more. And they're much more motivated and they're willing to do the work.
Makes sense.
So if I can give them whatever that group of assessment pieces are, where they can say, oh, gosh, I've been working on my stroke for a while. I clearly need to work on my speed or my green reading or whatever the case may be. It's like, yes, you're right. Okay, let's go to work. Now, obviously, the tricky part is, after this whole thing is done, now I've got to try to prioritize, right? So what of these three things is the lowest hanging fruit? What thing can I tweak? What dial can I move to make the boat go the fastest with the least work?
Right.
How I decide that, I just don't know.
So at what point, as you take them through the test, at some point you're going to show them the SAM putt data.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Yeah, some people don't see it. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said. And so let's just assume you show them the SAM putt data. What are some of the matching components that you like to see? Because I know there's a lot, but if you could maybe discuss some different scenarios. That I'm always trying to explain this, and that's just why putting's so hard.
Right.
I think putting's hard in general, but putting teaching is really, really hard
Right.
because of all the variables that are involved.
Yeah.
So any way you can piece that together, that would be awesome for the young coaches out there that are trying to figure out the matchups. Very popular word in full
sure.
swing, but
Yeah.
it's very important in putting, I think.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I haven't yet mentioned that I think is critical is at some point during this assessment, and it's usually after the initial SAM measurement, I'll ask them a very specific question in terms of when you're competing, when you're playing in a tournament, historically from junior golf up until today, as you've got a straight putt that's, let's say, 5 or 6 feet, and you happen to miss, do you tend to miss more right or more left?
Sure.
And based on what that answer is, I just kind of hold that in the back of my mind and say, okay, this person's either a pusher or a puller. If they don't know, I'll kind of try to dig a little deeper, and I might ask them, okay, which one of these makes you more upset? Which one are you afraid of more? And eventually,
I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to say that the questions that you ask are so critical.
Yeah. If a person doesn't know, either they haven't played golf long enough or they're not paying attention. And if they're not paying attention, that's where I would first start. Is like, you actually need to do this. You have to actually pay attention.
Be aware.
Right. So that, like the pattern recognition thing that I mentioned, better players get better faster because they do that. They're looking for patterns, and they're looking for, whether it's a positive pattern or a negative one, they're looking for it. And they can realize it and notice it and then adjust because of it. Players that are not doing it, that's why they're not getting better very well. They're just completely missing their own ability to learn from themselves compared to some others. Gosh, I forget what I was talking about. But trying to figure out kind of which way to go first. If I was giving a class to a bunch of younger coaches in terms of what matchups really, really matter, I would say I generally like a player who hits it close to where they aim it.
Yeah, I know you talk about the aim, the start line, the perception of. There's the three things you think that are critical for good putting, and you have to do 2 of the 3. Just talk about that.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So that's part of it.
Yeah,
I remember Brian more than you forgot.
You right? I'm gonna say I remember talking about this, but I don't remember exactly how it goes.
Yeah.
Right. So they've either got to aim it well, start it well. God, what was the other one? I should really remember this. This is really good.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was read it well. I think it was read it well.
Yeah, it was. Read it, start it, aim it.
Right.
And you had to do 2 of the 3.
You had to do at least 2 of those 3 pretty well
Yes.
to be able to make putts.
Right.
Yes. Oh gosh, I need to remember that. That's really good. That was really good a long time ago.
It's my show.
That's still good.
Yeah.
Because most of the players don't do all 3.
Right.
Which is perfectly fine.
It's okay.
Right.
It's just as long as they have.
Right. And this is now where the coaching piece really comes in terms of okay, which of these 3 do I expose to this person, and which of these 3 do I keep to myself to use to my advantage to help them later? It's not that I'm using it to make them feel bad or something.
No, but you still have to be in control.
Right, I have
of
to
the information.
I have to create the direction for improvement.
Exactly. There you go.
Right. So
Very better said than me. That's probably why I get fired more than you do.
whatever. For me, I would say most players don't really aim their putter per se. I would say they aim their stroke. So I think aim comes from stroke, not the other way around.
Yeah, talk about that. It was that intuitive versus cognitive aim, right?
Right. So we've talked about in the past, like, you know, if you could be with a person on their very first day on the putting green, and you give them a putter and you give them a straight putt, and you say, okay, hit this at the hole, and they hit a ball that goes to the right, what do they do next? And depending on the answer to that question, sets them down a particular road of some bias in some direction. Regardless of what it is, they've made a decision to do something. Most players, usually when they hit a ball where they don't want to, assume that they just aimed in the wrong place. It's much easier on their ego, it's much easier on their self-worth to just say, well, obviously I just didn't aim in the right place.
Happens in full swing a lot too.
Right. Instead of saying, well, I did this wrong. Well, no, I just aimed in the wrong place, so I'm going to adjust what this putter looks like, so now the ball goes where I want it to go. And now they immediately have this aim-stroke relationship. If that starts to get big enough, or if they do it long enough, it's going to stay with them forever. You're not going to make it go away.
It gets imprint.
It's imprinted, absolutely.
Yeah.
Until somebody tells them, hey, you actually aimed over there. No, I'm not. I aimed right here. See, the ball went right there. Well, you're not really aiming where you're hitting it. So now coaches can actually make players worse by telling them the truth.
Yeah. I've had that happen.
If they tell them the truth in the wrong way.
Yes.
I'm not advocating lying to your players.
No.
I'm advocating.
You got to know which popsicle stick to pull.
Exactly right.
And which to leave alone.
Putting Jenga is what this is, right? It's
or the whole house falls down.
I think I can get this piece out and just move it over here. It'll be okay. Or this whole thing's going to crumble.
Yeah, the left aimer that shoves it in the hole every time. Like, when do you tell him he's the left aimer?
Right. And that's an eternal question that I continue to struggle with. And I'll be perfectly honest, I'm going to try and nudge them to closer together without really telling them that I'm nudging them that way.
Sure.
So that
trying to get them closer to intuitive and cognitive aim.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
To where, I mean, it just makes sense.
It makes sense. It makes breaking putts a lot easier.
Sure.
It makes short putts a lot easier. Because usually what you'll find is that players that have this kind of fairly decent aim stroke bias is they get fairly good at like 8 feet, 15 feet. In the mid-range are doing just fine, and they get these 3 and 4 footers and they can't make them because they can't correct for that bias fast enough. Their stroke's not long enough to say, okay, well, I aim a ball to the left, but I usually push it in the hole. Okay, well, that's great when your stroke's 12 inches long, but when your stroke's only 3 inches long, you can't fix it fast enough.
Interesting.
And then they end up with like, oh gosh, I'm really good at like 8 to 10 feet, but I stink at 3. That's usually like a huge red flashing light of, okay, this person's probably got a pretty big, strong aim and stroke bias, at least in my mind. So if you can kind of start to nudge those things a little bit closer together, it doesn't really hurt the mid-range. It just makes the shorter ones better. It makes the breaking putts better. Because as soon as you've got a stroke aim bias, a player is now required to read a putt that's the same from opposite sides of the hole differently in order to make it. For example, let's say a person from 10 feet away aims, 4 inches to the right, whatever that is. It's 2 degrees or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's true, now they've got this right to lefter. They've got to read it, lower than the exact same putt on the other side of the hole because of how they stroke it. So the reads now become a result of how they stroke it and how they aim it. And now they learn this whole brand new puzzle pattern piece of, because I do this with my aim, because I do this with my stroke. Now they don't know any of this. Now I have to read it like this because the ball actually does what I need it to do. So at the end of the day, the person's going to do the best that they can come up with, right? Like nobody's ever come to me and said, I've done everything as bad as I can do it, so this is what I have. Whatever they're doing today is the best they've been able to figure out.
Sure.
And I've got to figure out, okay, well, how do I keep all of the best pieces of whatever this is, not throw away all of the history that they have that's all been imprinted in their mind of what this needs to look like for it to go in. They're going to have some positive results that mean something to them. I can't just throw that all away as like, okay, we're just going to start over. We're going to get, we're going to aim it here. We're going to get the lasers out, and like everything's going to be fine. That's how I started, right? I'm going to try to make everybody aim straight,
right.
hit it straight.
That's what I was talking about. That's the way I started.
Right.
Let's make perfect strokes and then
right.
have them adapt to the environment, and it's not the way to teach putting.
It does not make the boat go faster.
That's exactly right. Yeah, so the way you're doing it is like the way to go. The key is, like you said, all the EQ stuff to keep them engaged long enough
right.
to see the results they're going to get, because this is a long-term plan.
No doubt.
And that's where the tour players have to buy into that, and that's where you're getting better and better, because obviously your stable's getting bigger and people are figuring out how good the information is, but it's the adaptability, I think, of the coach that's the key.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly going to be certain partnerships that are going to be easier than others.
Sure.
I would certainly say, if I'm being honest, on the simpler side of things, that's something I've really had to study and practice and learn how to do, because that's not my nature. My nature is to live in the rabbit hole and pull the flashlight out and a shovel and just dig and dig and dig and dig until I've got all the minutia out possible. Yeah. But then working with players that don't live in that environment has really helped me expand as my coaching abilities have kind of adapted to what they've needed.
The challenging students make us better.
No doubt, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true in any case, whether it's full swing, short game, or putting.
Right. Certainly when I started, Trevor Lillman was my first student.
Yeah.
And I really struggled trying to be what I thought a putting coach should be like, and not being myself. And I'm eternally grateful to Trevor to help me kind of get to that place of I can only coach my best when I'm in who I am. And I can't coach well if I'm trying to be somebody that I think that they want me to be.
Yeah, and that's the question I always ask, is what failure sort of spurred you or gave you success later. I mean, that's you just being self-reflective,
right,
and self-aware of, like, I was not the person I needed to be for that player, right?
Correct.
And being adaptive to,
right.
to what you
and being
be.
simple doesn't mean I'm not being true to myself.
Yeah.
But so, like, I can still be simple for someone who needs simple, but I'm still going to coach them the way that I need to coach them the best.
Sure.
I'm not going to coach them the way that I think that they want me to coach them, which is what I did the first time. Like,
Gotcha.
I had this image of, okay, well, here's a guy who's won the Masters, he's a tour player, he's played all over the world, blah, blah, blah. He's probably expecting their putting coach to do this, so I'm going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of pitfall is where I struggled right away, was trying to outthink myself.
Sure, yeah.
It's like, I don't want to do bad at this. This is a good opportunity. I've never had the opportunity to do something like this. Here's a very, very well-established player, and I want to do my best for this person. I'm going to do what I think they want. And that was just a bad choice. And I got much better at it when I was like, okay, I'm going to at least be myself. I can modify that in terms of what I say and what I do to what I think will help them. I'm not going to modify who I am to help them. That's right. That's the big thing that I learned fairly early on.
Yeah. So how important is it to learn to be a putting? I don't think you have to be like an expert at putting, but just thinking about just the coach out there that's listening, because this was me 10 years ago when I was pretty proficient at full swing. And I'm like, all right, I'm doing that self-assessment and going, I have no idea what I'm doing. I mean, I was just thinking back to the putting lesson I used to give. It's like, that's such crap, right? I mean, it's like I was doing them not a service at all. And it's like, how do I get stronger in that area? I mean, what advice would you give them? I mean, how do you learn? Would you go read books? Where do you go observe? I mean, the landscape's obviously different. I know this is a difficult question nowadays.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's got to learn the way they learn best. I learned best by speaking to people who I knew were willing to destroy everything that I said.
Yeah.
And I was okay with that. Like, I've always learned best by exposing information, not by like hiding it. So I'll have an idea. I'll ask somebody what they think of that idea. They will rip it to shreds. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, you're right. That's terrible. Okay, I need another idea. So I would have, Chris Como and I would talk nearly every day when we first kind of got to know each other, and it was just day after day of just destroying each other in terms of what we thought was okay and what might work. And then whatever's left over, whatever's in the ashes, is like, okay, this might actually be okay.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that you guys would actually debate topics the other direction of what you actually felt.
Yep.
I mean, it's such a great exercise. I mean, do you have an example of that? Do you remember some of the topics you guys were talking about? I mean, it's probably been a while ago. But
it was quite a while ago.
Yeah, I mean, but that would be kind of interesting to hear.
I mean, we would
what
argue
was going on.
I mean, there was a very common debate. I'm sure it still happens now, where, what's more important, face or path? Like when we were doing full swing stuff, do you change the face, that'll change the path, or if you change the path, will it change the face? And there was, fairly decent arguments for either side of that.
Yeah, I definitely can agree.
And, I generally leaned on the side of, I think the face will shape the path. And I can't really remember what side he would take, but like those kinds of ideas where there really isn't necessarily a right or wrong answer per se, but there's good arguments that can be made for both sides. And then we're just going to just destroy the other side just to see if we can change our own mind, which is really the end goal of it was, can I attack my own position well enough to say my position is not good enough anymore? And then I have to either modify my position or delete it or change it or go in a completely different direction. So a perfect example of that would be, gosh, was it this tournament? It might have actually been.
The Wells Fargo.
Right. So 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think you told me the story.
A guy I was working with a little bit, a guy named Brad Elder, took a lesson from Dave Stockton. It was during this tournament this week, but it was at a different golf course. And Chris was driving me back to the golf course or something or other, and I asked Chris, okay, what did Brad and Dave spend their time on? And Chris mentioned a couple things, and one of the things that he had mentioned was that, if you're hitting putts that go left to right, you should make sure you put the ball further back in your stance. I'm like, what? What? He said, tell me that again. What did he say? It's like, well, when you got putts that go left to right, and you're right-handed, make sure you put the ball further back. And I'm like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That makes absolutely no sense at all. That's only going to make the ball go more to the right. And Chris goes to me, instead of looking at it that way, why don't you try to figure out why he would say that? Instead of just saying it was stupid, try to figure out, well, what possible reason could
Como.
could one of the best putters of all time have for saying something that seemingly didn't make any sense? And the only thing that I came up with was part of another part of that particular lesson was that Dave had mentioned they didn't really care about aim. Right, you just aim it.
So he was obviously aiming well left,
wherever you want. Right.
Yeah.
So if you don't really care about aim and you put the ball further back, you're probably going to aim even more to the left to deal with that discomfort, and now you're probably still going to be okay. So it was, whether that's actually true or not, I do not know.
Yeah, but you got to figure it out, right?
I've got to try.
Guy that won the PGA or whatever,
no doubt, and one of the best putters of all time.
Yeah,
like there has to be a reason why he's saying it.
Right.
So like that kind of idea, and it wasn't that necessarily unnatural to me. I was just mad because a student of mine went to see somebody else.
Sure, yeah, we all would be.
It was a constant reminder of how kind of Chris and I kind of bounce off each other ideas in terms of, no, you can't just dismiss something. You have to figure out why this person would do this and why they would say this, and especially when they have the pedigree of a Dave Stockton. There's got to be something that you should be able to figure out of why he would say this.
Critical thinking, problem solving. And I gave a talk at the South Georgia section a few months ago on putting, and that was I said, what are the skills necessary to teach putting at a high level? And I think that's number one. Number one, yeah. Critical thinking and problem solving has got to be way up there. 100%. So talk a little bit about, I know there's no absolutes, but just as far as mechanics that you enjoy. I mean, we all have preferences. Yeah, the preferences, because there's still going to be some preferences, and obviously we have some sort of absolutes that we've gleaned from Sandpot Lab and Quintic and whatnot. So I have like sort of my matrix of hierarchy that I think have to happen in a mechanical stroke to get that production of start line and whatever. What do you think?
So big preferences of mine would be certainly a stroke that is not bursty, that doesn't have a over accelerated look to it.
More constant or decreasing acceleration.
If I'm going with a non-SAM, just visual view, something that just doesn't look like
Okay.
it's just
Short to long or long to short?
long to short.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah.
A preference that I continue to find that surprises me, I think I mentioned this in the car the other day, of players trying to move the grip instead of moving the head. Players that there's a drill I have in one of my videos called the shortest putt you can hit drill, and it's not usually part of my assessment but when I start to see certain things show up, whether it be poor distance control or like wavy backstrokes, or especially on putts that are short, or like a person just doesn't seem to be able to make a stroke smooth enough, I'll start to ask them the question of, okay, which part of the club are you trying to move? Are you trying to move the head, or are you trying to move the grip? And it's not a question that they're usually used to hearing.
Sure.
And so this actually happened very specifically with Danny, and it was at Augusta. It was on the putting green, maybe Wednesday or Tuesday. So it was me and Danny and his caddy Sam, and we were working on some short putts, and I could kind of see the putter head waving in the back. And he's like, "Yeah, the putter's just moving all over the place. I can't manage it." So I asked him, "Are you moving the head or the grip?" And he goes, "Well, the head." And his caddy goes, "What do you mean you're moving the head? You can't move the head. You move the grip." and later on, Sam Cummings like, "I thought that was a trick question." It's like, no, this is a legit question.
Mm-hmm.
And then we talked about the idea of, okay, well, you just try to move your hands back and forth and move the grip and just kind of let the head come along, and it immediately smoothed it right out. His distance control immediately improved. And so like those kinds of little things, I haven't yet found anyone that moves the head as their focus that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Usually the head is more of a response to the movement of the grip.
Sure. Makes sense.
Hands or whatever. Other than that, I would say I have a preference to a softer hold than a tighter one.
Okay.
I know a tighter one can work just fine.
Yeah.
Not a preference.
He can
of
be
mine.
too soft, right? I mean,
It can certainly be too soft.
Yeah, I've seen that.
I haven't yet seen too hard for someone that likes a hard one, but I generally like enough bended overness.
Enough forward bend.
So the player can move their arms back and forth. I don't dislike some elbow flex. I think that's okay. That's about it, really. I don't really have too much else. Like, I don't necessarily care if it's square open or closed. I don't really care if it's forward pressed or not. I don't really care if it's
just as long as you're producing the launch that you want, right? We talked about that a lot today.
Yeah, exactly.
With Charles, right?
Yep.
I mean, what do you like as far as launch? That's a good question. How quickly is the ball going to turn over? How much is the ball going to be in the air?
Yeah,
how much loft do we need on the putter?
I certainly prefer sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
I know Michael Breed has caught a lot of crud for saying hitting it with negative loft is okay, and I actually agree with him.
I think I do too.
I think that is actually okay.
Yep.
Especially if you've got enough rise angle for it.
So rise above effective loft is still a good thing,
still
right?
A good thing, absolutely.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, 100%. I would say I generally prefer lower lofted than I think most putters have too much loft on them.
I agree. I don't know what 4 degrees with Scotty Cameron's. I still haven't got that answer.
No, I don't get it at all.
I'm thinking 1.5 to 2.5 would be how I'd build a putter if it was me.
Yeah.
I don't know, just what we've seen on Sam and how many putting strokes we've seen.
So
it's easier to manage.
I'm going to ask you a question.
All right.
So when you think of players that are good putters that use a mallet, what percentage of them would you say have a significant forward press or like a dragging motion in their stroke?
I'd say very little. Not as many. I mean, they probably need it. You would think logically they would need it because they probably got more of a either straight center shafted putter or an S curve.
So who are the best mallet putters, would you say? So I would put like Jason Day in that category.
Yeah, Jason Day for sure. I mean,
Dustin
DJ's
Johnson,
pretty good
Brian
at
Harmon,
times. Yeah.
Furyk I would put in that category.
Yeah, and they don't do a whole lot of pressing. They're pretty neutral, like not much going on with the wrists. Yeah, it's interesting that you say like you see more forward presses out of like plumbers' necks.
Right.
Which makes no sense,
Which
right?
makes no sense, right?
Yeah, because they've already got it built in.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So there's just like those kinds of things that's like, well, why is that person doing that?
It's right. I think it's more like when you look down at that, you're like, okay, I don't have to change anything. It's everything's lined up.
Right.
But
like one of the things we've been messing with Danny's putter, so he uses a mallet, and if the shaft angle gets really neutral or slightly ahead, like the putter just twists like wide open, like the sole of the mallet is not flat, right? It's kind of like it's almost like a fastback, if you will. It's kind of lowest at the front, and then it kind of works its way up.
Yeah.
And if he gets the shaft kind of neutralish or forward, it now sits on that kind of little high point and just spins wide open.
His is an Odyssey, maybe, or is it?
His is an Odyssey.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Like the 3-line, something or other. I'm not really good with putter names. I should get better at that.
I mean, it's not like you're a putting coach.
I know exactly right. It's like it's a mallet.
Whatever you got,
lines on it and a
just
shaft
roll
that's
it.
half metal and carbon or whatever. It
yeah,
is.
yeah.
So like, I wonder if like just the design in the club makes it difficult to manage the face at address because of how it is. And then like in Charles's case, we're having a hard time getting the launch low enough because the CGs are so far back.
Right.
Where forward press you would think would help with that part, but then when you do it, then the face isn't managed.
Right. Yeah, because like you can't affect another variable.
Exactly.
Like aim.
Right.
Like it's not worth. Right. That's what we were talking about coming home. Like the launch is good, but I would rather much have somebody that can aim it and start it online with a little chatter.
Right. Yeah. Chatter. Yeah.
I can handle that.
Yeah.
As long as they can manage the pace, then I think they're going to still make putts. And I think he's going to putt great this week. His putting stroke looks amazing.
Yeah. But I mean, the key for the coaches out there is that you've got to picture the putting puzzle as that what it is. Like it's not just, you can't just fix one thing and everything just falls in line.
Yeah.
Putting just does not work that way. You have to keep in mind all of the variables and kind of how they all interact with each other. I always use the example of a Rubik's Cube to kind of talk about it, where like, okay, let's say I'm working on the aim, and that represents like the white side of the face of the Rubik's Cube. It's like, okay, I got that good. Okay, now I'm going to work on their stroke path, and okay, that's the red side. And by the time I fix the red side, the white side's all jacked up. Like you can't just do one piece without affecting the others. You've got to work in tandem with, okay, how is this aim going to affect his start line? That affects his pace. It affects his read. That affects all of these things. It's like emptying out a puzzle box, and then you get all the puzzle pieces just turned over. You start putting them together, and then the picture changes. It's like, well, shit. None of these pieces don't fit together anymore. And you're constantly redoing this puzzle, and being okay with that. That the goal isn't to make it perfect. The goal is to try to continually make it better, and being okay with, some things that are just personal. Like this person has this little idiosyncrasy, this slightly unorthodox, whatever it is. Daniel Berger's stroke is Daniel Berger's stroke. It's not going to be Lauren Roberts' stroke or Ben Crenshaw's stroke.
Right.
And that's okay.
How do you get the most out of that?
How do I get the most out of that?
How do you get him to know where the ball is going to start?
Yep.
How it feels coming off the face, how far it's going to roll,
right.
And then get him to read it decently, and you make a good putter, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
It's that odd, and I always tell the story about Chris Como when we were walking at the at River Run a few years ago at the Web Finals.
Mm-hmm.
That I asked him about Jamie's swing, and we were talking about stuff, and he said, "Figure out why the odd swings work."
Right.
And that's exactly what teaching putting is look at it from the other side and figure out why that jacked up move is holding everything.
Right.
And then figure out how to make that better. Or, you know, it's such a moving target, right? I mean, it's always a moving target.
Right.
And I think that's where, you know, you're so good at that and getting better and
Trying.
yeah, you know.
Yeah. I'm not going to stop. I mean, I thoroughly love what I do, and I like the uncertainty pieces of it. I actually enjoy that part. Like I if I could ever make it perfect, I would probably not want to do this anymore.
Yeah, it'd be boring, right?
Right. It's like, well, you just do this, and this, and you'll be fine. Go away.
Well, and that's the thing with putting is every surface is different. The environment changes constantly.
Right.
So every single putt is a different problem to solve.
Correct.
And that's why I try to get my players to understand. It's like, understand probability, for one.
Yeah.
So your expectations don't get out of whack.
Yeah.
So you don't get super frustrated. So you can kind of manage that expectation frustration level, and then try to increase the probability as much as you can with whatever drills you're doing and practice and understanding your tendencies. It's just all that stuff, right?
Right. And be prepared to adapt. I don't think I think one of the best things that good putters do is their ability to take present real-time info and integrate it with past experience in a better way than other players do. I sometimes hear stories of a player playing a golf course that they've played 100 times before, and they're like, I've had this putt before, it always does this. And then they're in the environment and it's maybe rained 3 days out of the last 5, and now this environment is not an environment they've actually ever done. Mm-hmm. But they just remember all these other ones. The best putters can integrate the present real time with the past and say, okay, because of these 2 things, now I'm going to do this. I think great putters have great memories. I think they're very much more visual than most people give them credit for. That it's not God given. It's pattern recognition. It's memory recall. It's adaptation. It's those kinds of things.
Boom, that's it.
Okay.
Who's the best putter that you've like? Is there? I know because your guys have played so many practice rounds with other players. Has there been a guy that you looked at and like, man, that guy's like really good, or is it sort of come and go from week to week? Well, you can obviously look at the stats. I mean, but I'm just saying, you know what I mean? Like the guy that just stands out to like, that's sort of what I would like to see a putter look like.
I mean, I've always been a fan of Aaron Baddeley's process and his, what's the right word? His commitment level to what he's about to do. Mm-hmm. And his stroke is quite unorthodox.
Yeah.
A ton of wrist and elbow flexion, a whole lot of stuff going on. But just the way that he approaches it, the belief in what he's about to do seems very clear and very visibly noticeable. I think Graham McDowell kind of has that look also, like where he kind of, rolls the ball with his arm. He was telling me something the other week when we were at Hilton Head, and this really surprised me, and it might surprise some of your listeners. So he was talking about, getting like the pre-shot routine, getting ready to hit a putt, and he was talking about how he would stand behind the ball, and he's kind of reading it, and he kind of holds his putter with his hand, and then he gives it the slam on the ground, and as he walks up, he's like, gathering data. I get over the ball. I look out, gathering data. I get over the ball. Take my last couple licks, and I'm just collecting data, making little adjustments, little fine tunes, little this, little that, and then I take a breath. I go.
That's what he's saying to you.
That's what he's saying to me.
He's thinking.
Right.
Wow.
So the amount of data collection that he's continually doing, from standing behind the ball to walking up to getting over the ball to adjusting over the ball, he's constantly collecting data, and then he finally decides on something, takes an out breath, and goes. And I'm like, wow, I didn't really think there was that much collecting going on. It looked much more freer and more fluid than that, but it was pretty interesting to hear.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so last couple of questions.
Okay,
this is from Hardesty actually.
Uh-oh.
He said, have John talk about the clown's mouth.
Yeah. Okay.
And you mentioned Baddeley because I know we've talked about the 3D elbow.
Oh, the 3D elbow. Okay, so the clown's mouth is an idea that John has used quite often that I've adopted as well, and he would describe it better than I will, so he's going to get mad that I don't describe it as well as I should.
It's okay.
But
I'm sure you do fine.
He would call it an area that if I get the ball in this particular area, the ball will just kind of funnel to where the hole is. So it would be like the top of a funnel mouth, that if I just get the ball in here, it'll just kind of collect down where the hole is, and there's a good chance of getting it in. And that area is not in a specific place. Sometimes it's kind of near the hole, sometimes it's halfway there. It's like just this kind of portal, if you will, that if I
we just went Harry Potter on it.
if I get the ball kind of in this area, moving in a certain way, it's gonna be okay. And it's an idea that you've seen me kind of put the gates out and just kind of roll it through the gate.
Yeah.
I know Cameron McCormick does something very, very similar.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure more than just him and I do something like that. And it's based, it's John's clown's mouth idea. It's the same.
Okay.
It's just
makes sense.
Different words for the same idea. If you're a coach and you're talking to your player, I'll kind of throw this in there. The benefit of a clown's mouth or a gate is that it's a particular language that you and your player can speak that will match. In other words, if your player gets up and says, okay, I'm getting ready to hit my putt, and then the coach comes along and says, okay, where are you trying to aim this? The player might say something not even close to what they're about to do. But
doesn't matter.
Correct.
Yeah.
But then the coach will say, well, no, you're actually aimed over here. You need to. So they go down this rabbit hole of saying things maybe they shouldn't be saying. But if a coach comes up to a player and says, where should this ball be about halfway through? Now the player can say, well, I think the ball is going to kind of roll through here. That takes all the aim bias out, takes all the stroke bias out. It's a language that they can both look at and say, okay, yeah, I think if the ball goes through there, it'll be okay. Where there's no more, specific aim or stroke. Because if the player happens to be a pusher,
he's a left aim pusher, you're gonna mess him up.
The coach is a puller.
Yep.
Now they got like totally different reads. They might both be 100% correct, but they're not the same place in their own mind. If they both say, well, I think the ball should go right about here, they're like, oh yeah, I think that's about okay. So that's a really safe way to talk to your players is where should the ball be? So that's still kind of clown's mouth idea. And the 3D elbow thing, this is an idea that was born out of the 3D flat spot that Chris and Sasha developed whatever years ago it was.
Yeah.
Where if I can get certain joint alignments to work in a certain way, I can get the path to go in a fairly straightish line. Not necessarily a level one, but where the club path orientation is more similar for a longer period of time. And gosh, this had to have been like the hotel at John Deere when I was with Trevor and Chris was with Aaron, and John and Chris and I were all staying together, and we were in this hotel room. We had a nice hotel room, huge, like it had 3 beds, like this massive, like suite type thing. And we got talking about, well, I wonder if there's like a 3D flat spot in putting. And at least on the full swing side, one of the big pieces of a 3D flat spot was the left shoulder that was kind of going kind of up and around.
Sure.
And so we're like, okay, well, putting stroke doesn't necessarily have that much, but for some players, they have this kind of, lead elbow flexion.
Yeah, like lawnmower is what I call it.
Lawnmower, absolutely.
Yeah, I think I got that from you actually.
Which would have the kind of the same idea where I could get, this kind of path to go maybe a little bit straighter, a little bit longer. Aaron Baddeley very clearly has it.
Mm-hmm.
Russell Henley very clearly has it. Anybody that's ever used a belly putter has it. I've taught it to a lot of people. I've taught it to people, and they've gone back to their coaches, and they're like, I've never heard that ever discussed, ever. What are you doing? But if you watch enough golfers, there's a lot of players that have it.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's an idea that, I haven't really necessarily recommended for everyone, but if somebody has it, I'm perfectly fine with a little bit of lead elbow flexion. I think it helps a lot with
the path
coming back in.
Yeah, I was going to say the front of
it.
the arc, right?
Front of the arc,
yeah,
100%.
I'm sure I stole that from you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got some players mostly good players will swing it a little in to out and like keep going out.
Right.
So to build the front of the arc,
Yep.
I'll try to get that left elbow to work towards the left shirt seam.
Yep.
I call it the mini lawnmower.
Yeah.
Which, and I think keeps the face more square to the path as
100%.
well.
Right.
Yeah.
It's one of the things Danny, Willett, and I are working on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. I was watching a little bit he has that tendency.
Right. Okay, it's kind of like path out to the right.
Right.
Push.
Get the heel strike and the whole deal starts to break down a little bit.
Yeah.
So conversely, and then we'll wrap up. It's a question I've asked a few putting coaches, and I've got my own ideas, but how is Bryson DeChambeau managing his low point with his arms so straight? All right, and I'll say this, and again, I got a very, very small data sample, and I'm going on public here in the podcast, but I don't care. But this is just me curiosity. Is all of the players that I've worked with, whether all skill levels, that stand a little tall and then have their arms completely extended where they're sort of at full radius, all tend to hit down on the ball, is what I'm seeing. And I was seeing that, I'm like, well, that makes sense because now they've sort of maxed out the fulcrum of how much the club can go back up. So, and that makes me think when you said the 3D elbow, where there is some flexion going on throughout the stroke. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I asked David Orr this, and I'll let you answer it before I tell you what he said. Because I know Bryson is turning over every stone. He's got Quintic.
Oh yeah.
So I know his golf ball is not hopping.
Right.
There's not much chatter. So how is he managing that with arms really straight?
I don't know how he's managing it. I will say that if he's not hitting down on it, then he would probably be doing a lot of right side bend and a lot of rocking and head moving back. It's very difficult to have straight arms and hit up on it well without doing a whole lot of other things.
Yeah.
It's very difficult on the body to do it. Danny was kind of in that same category.
Because he has a short putter, right?
it's
So
like
he's got really
31-inch.
long arms. So it kind of, his putter kind of fits him because his arms are so long.
Right. And he was purposely trying to get like some I don't know, that would be supination, I guess. So
yes.
At least the left or whatever. And we put a little softness in, a little flex in, so that he could actually get the putter to come back around. But how is he managing it? I mean, it's got to be like, I've seen Bryson like set up his station.
I know he's got zero loft on his putter. He's got the sick putter.
It's a sick putter. Well, I think it's a variable loft, isn't it?
Yeah, it's variable loft from the
across
bottom.
face,
yep,
right?
bottom to the top. So he's definitely hitting it probably lower on the face where it's like 0 to 1 degrees of loft.
Right.
That would be one
Yeah.
answer that would make sense.
Yeah. He's probably got a highly measured ball position, so that is at least being able to fairly
Sure. Had to
replicate
be
it.
relatively forward.
Relatively forward.
Yeah. David said he was managing it more with his left shoulder going up a little more. I don't see it though.
I don't see that either.
I don't see it. You know what I mean? I'm just curious. I don't know if I didn't know because I didn't know if you'd like looked at him up close. Maybe something I'll check out this week at the Wells.
He does have some of that, but it seems like it's after the strike.
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't see it. It would have to be really abrupt, I would think, for him to manage the loft and the rise angle with such a straight arm position. I don't know. So
yeah,
if anybody out there knows the answer, DM me.
Certainly if he's like straight armed and whatnot, and his ball position is fairly regular, and he can keep his axis stable, he's going to deliver the same thing pretty regularly.
Sure.
It's just, whatever that delivery is. It wouldn't surprise me that it is not, a rise angle higher than the loft. I doubt he can do that.
Yeah, I think it'd be difficult.
It'd be very difficult with that environment.
Yeah.
Because as soon as the putter passes low point, it's going to be adding loft to it. Like he can't make the loft stay off of it with his arms extended. He just can't do it.
So I'm not completely out of my mind.
No.
I just keep seeing it, right? It's like then you start seeing patterns.
Yeah.
And it just was interesting to me. So.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I think with a variable face loft, he can kind of get around some of that. But yeah, I bet it's pretty darn level when he strikes it.
Awesome.
That'd be my guess. I don't know.
Dude, thanks so much for coming on again and sharing your knowledge and information. I always learn something every time we get together, and I'm so fortunate to have you as a friend and as a mentor for my putting. And tell the guys out there, the listeners out there, how they can reach you, ask you questions, reach out to you on social.
Sure thing. So I have no website. I have a domain saved, and I used to have a website, and then I got really mad and I erased it all. So like all those blog posts are all gone. Like
wow.
I didn't back up any of it.
I didn't realize that.
Oh yeah, it's all gone.
Huh.
But on the social side, you can get me at on every platform at John Graham Golf, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I don't do Snapchat. I don't do anything else. But Twitter is what I still do the most. Instagram a little bit. Facebook almost never anymore.
Yeah.
And YouTube, I haven't shot a video in a while. Actually, I mean, if I guess we could put the Short Game Secrets website on there, right?
I was about to plug it. I mean, gotta plug your brand, man. Yeah.
Right.
So the Short Game Secrets.
Short Game Secrets.
You've got three. Yeah, you got 3 series out already now. You guys are working on number 4.
So there was an initial wedge and putting video set, and then James did a couple video sets of just wedge play, like a progression.
Okay.
And then I did a couple on the putting side that was like an assessment, and then like corrections videos on each of the puzzle pieces. And we actually shot a bunch of stuff in December or November, and we haven't finished editing it or released it yet. There's like a Yips video in there. There's a practice video in there. And maybe one other. I can't remember exactly what it is.
Stay tuned for that.
Stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But right now they can get it at shortgamesecrets.tv.
Shortgamesecrets.tv. That's correct. Yeah.
Awesome. Go pick it up. I mean, it's still awesome information. You got all your drills, and James' stuff is getting better and better and fantastic. So he's working with Molinari. I mean, you guys are
21 out of 22 up and downs at the Masters.
Unbelievable, right? Yeah. And it was like, I told you, like, I was so proud to like see you guys out there coaching at the Masters, which is so cool. And hopefully someday I'm going to be out there and be alongside.
That's right. Get out of the stands and get out on the ground.
There it is.
Yeah. There
it is. So thanks again, man. This has been amazing, and
thank you.
I appreciate you coming on.
Always. Anytime.
What's up, everybody? Guru back here again with a couple of things before you jump off. First, big thank you to John Graham for coming back on the show and sharing more in depth of some of the stuff maybe we haven't heard about his putting coaching, and just insights into his incredible mind and the way he approaches teaching, and the way really he approaches people. That is more important. Also, make sure you reach out to him on Twitter or Instagram at John Graham Golf. Give him a social wave, ask him a question, tell him how much you appreciated the show. And also, don't be afraid to share. And make sure you download this episode and download all the previous episodes from the Golf Guru Show, as that is how we get our numbers, and that's how we can continue to create the content that we're putting out. So hope you appreciate it. I enjoy giving it. It is free. All I ask for you to do is share it with a friend or an enemy that you might think enjoy the show. So I appreciate that. Thank you for listening. Thank you for following. You can reach me also through my website at golfgurutv.net, where you can find videos, articles, and more information on my teaching and coaching. If you have a question about the show, shoot me an email at golfgurushow@gmail.com, or hit me up on the DM at the aforementioned platforms on the Soch. So this show and all episodes of the Golf Guru Show were produced by myself, Jason Sutton. Music is by Zach Mullet, aka Cutta Beats. And leave me an iTunes review. It'd be great if you would leave me a 5-star review. Again, that's what keeps the show going and keeps us wanting to create the content that we're putting out. And as I leave you with the infamous Jim Rohn quote, study, practice, teach, and then pass it on. I'll talk to you next time. Thanks so much for listening.